first action item. Once, twice, hearing none, it's unanimous, consensus carries the minutes forward for our official record. And following our great tradition, we have a presentation from the Alta Associates today on the Congress Street Bridge study. Are we ready with
Great.
Steve, Joe, and Lindsay?
Yeah, so I just wanted to introduce, the project a little bit. Steve Streikman and Joe LaCivita can speak to it as well. But this is a joint intermunicipal effort that was done between Troy and Waterloo. Lindsay Zepting from Alta Planning and Design is going to give the presentation today. And Joe and Steve, would you like to give an introduction or have any words?
Sure. I just wanted to kick it off. As I
we're not hearing you, Joe.
Let me see.
I'm hearing him.
Everyone on the Zoom can hear him.
Is that, can you hear, coin the phrase, can you hear me now?
Everybody talking? Multiple people were just talking on the.
We're not hearing
Yeah, go
anybody
to
talking.
audio settings.
Are you
They
hearing
can't.
me? This is
So
Steve.
you just have to turn your speaker volume up.
I don't think that they can hear anyone in that room, so.
Right.
Where am I? Here.
Test it.
Try that.
Adjust it.
How about now?
There you go.
Sound that on Zoom, we can hear you.
You can hear me, but we can't hear you guys.
But you can't hear
No, I can hear you.
Hey,
Come on.
thank you. Sorry about that,
I'm
folks.
happy to come here 10 minutes before the meeting next time.
Yeah, we gotta write down the, we had it working yesterday
I know.
afternoon. I don't know what happened today, but anyways, sorry, folks. Go ahead, Joe.
That's okay. Okay. I sat in that room and I apologize. I couldn't be there today, but sat through many projects reviews over the years being involved with the town of Colony. So this was exciting for me being the new general manager for the city of Waterloo. This is the first time I was involved with the combined study. It's probably one of the best planning exercises in my career or during my career. Combined a couple of entities, each individual outcomes that they were looking for, but through a mutual agreement, the outcomes were benefiting both communities as well once they're constructed, the public as well. I just wanted to thank the team that, together, the city of Troy had Steve Strickman, James Rath, and Andrew Kreshik, fantastic people to work with. The city of Waterloo, of course, Paul Murphy and, the mayor and our council. The design team, I can't say enough about, Lindsay, Kara McKnight, Christy DeCoco, and members of the Alta team, as well as EDR for Albert and Chazen, all brought, and I can't forget our members of Department of State. The process just brought vibrancy, vision, excitement, knowledge base that everyone had, but an open mind, at every meeting, with optimism towards the enhancements to approve, an aged infrastructure, from both the pedestrian and vehicular amenities. Excited to see what goes on in the future. I know Steve's excited as well. There's many things that are going to happen on his end as well as ours. I could never imagine in my lifetime that we would have plotted out tunneling under 787 as an access point for our small community. But it's if and when construction, and we know it will be, it's going to really be one of those transformational improvements that the city of Waterloo will ever have. I don't want to steal any of Steve's thunder or Lindsay's as well, but again, if any of us can practice, working together with a community, this is an ideal one to show what the outcomes were. And thanks for the opportunity to present today. I guess I'll turn it to you or Steve.
I think I'm going to go at the end, so I'm just going to turn it right over to Lindsay right now.
Yeah, and just had to find the unmute button after I shared the screen. I assume everyone can see presentation. seeing nodding heads. All right, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly to not take up too much time today, but this is a really exciting project. It was great to work with both communities. So I'm going to run through a little bit about the planning process and also the results. You can see the image here of all the priority projects and how they knit together, and I'll get into that. So as Joe mentioned, it was the City of Troy and the City of Waterloo joint effort funded by the New York State Department of State. Also led the planning study with subconsultants Chazen, Foyt Albert, and EDR. This was our study area focused around the Congress Street Bridge, but also inclusive of the neighborhoods on within the City of Troy and within the City of Waterloo to make sure we looked at it more holistically. We had a number of project stakeholders, and stakeholder involvement was really key throughout this planning study. It was additional City of Waterloo staff and elected officials, additional City of Troy staff, CDTA, New York State DOT was really actively involved throughout the study, seeing as they own and maintain the bridge as Route 2. CDTC, thank you for your involvement. Troy Housing Authority, the Waterloo Housing Authority, and also interest groups. And we had 3 different rounds of stakeholder meetings within about 4 months. The project was from Thanksgiving last year, was adopted in April, so it was a really quick study. It was really great to keep everyone engaged throughout the process to have it at such a fast pace. And one thing that we did throughout the project was we had our various stakeholder groups, but we mixed and matched. So it wasn't always the same stakeholders grouped together. So it was really good to see that interaction and that feedback as everyone fed off of each other in various different groups and formats. We also did an online survey. We got almost 400 survey responses, which was great. We asked people to respond whether they were in the City of Troy, City of Waterloo, outside the study area. How do they currently travel? And we let them select multiple options. Obviously, most drive, but there's also a lot of people that walk and bike and take public transportation in the area. Why are they choosing not to walk and bike? Hazardous conditions or lack of facilities were the top responses. We also asked what projects were most important to them. And, we showed this in the study based on where people were living, whether they were in the City of Troy or the City of Waterloo. So it was really interesting to see overwhelmingly a shared use path across the bridge was supported by both communities, but certainly there were different priorities for different priority projects, whether the respondents were the City of Troy. Generally, what improvements do respondents want to see, and would they be more likely to walk and bike if improvements were made? Resoundingly, yes. That's common is what we see in those responses. One thing that was really, I would say, unique about this project and worked out really well was we started with the priority projects, not general recommendations and then identifying what the priority projects are. We did a little bit in reverse, and it worked out really well because it was really easy to see what those major projects would be that would instigate the transformation and be a catalyst for further development and improvement within both municipalities. So I'll really quickly go through each of the priority projects that we really focused on through the study, starting with the shared use path across the Congress Street Bridge. Should we know, we did break out the intersection improvements in Waterloo and the ramps and intersection improvement in Troy and the shared use path across the bridge as 3 priority projects. However, they're all interconnected and have to be done at once. And Steve will talk about what's next for that project. So the bridge reconfiguration, the shared use path, surprisingly, the cost for this improvement wasn't as high as one might expect to be because we were able to configure the bridge so that traffic would be on the north side, the median barrier would remain in place, and essentially the whole south side of the bridge would be a shared use path or linear park, really able to design it that way. So that makes it more cost effective, provides more room for cyclists and pedestrians, especially given the grade of the bridge. There was a lot of discussion, north versus south, and when you look at holistically the rest of the projects that are associated with this, looking at the intersections, the south side was edged over just slightly. So this is a photo sim of what that shared use path will look like on the Congress Street Bridge. The Ferry Street and Congress Street improvements. This is a project that was already on the tip, but we looked at it in connection for enhancing bicycle and pedestrian connectivity as well as transit connectivity. Decided essentially Ferry Street, converting that to two-way and being the transit priority corridor. Congress Street, keeping it one way, but reducing a lane, and this being the bicycle and pedestrian corridor. So really prioritizing movements throughout the city and enhancing those two corridors for the downtown, providing more connectivity. And this is what the race cycle track would look like on Congress Street. Cross section, so you can kind of see what we've been maintaining parking on Ferry Street, two-way vehicular traffic as opposed to two lanes in one direction, maintaining parking, implementing the cycle track on Congress Street. Really trying to create that as a slow street through downtown. We also looked at the River Street connection. So this is the reconfiguration of the intersection of the city of Troy. Anyone that's been downtown and mistakenly gone over the Congress Street Bridge when you really didn't mean to, because that's happened to me. So the configuration currently doesn't lend itself well to connectivity, and also encourages higher speeds with the off ramps. So mitigating that. So we came up with a plan to remove the slip ramps. We would still have this widened approach on the bridge because that's part of the actual bridge structure, but really narrowing the roadway and creating a four-way intersection. It'd be two-way into Ferry Street, and also incorporating CDTA bus stops. This would be part of the bus plus route through this area. Photo sim of what the bridge and the intersection and the approach to the bridge might look like. Front Street Trail conversion in the city of Troy. So what we're looking at here is closing Front Street underneath the bridge with the new intersection connection. That route isn't as needed. So really converting that into a full linear park along the waterfront. This would also accommodate the redevelopment of the Troy housing complex in a much better format than they'd be allowed to with the ramps currently in place. So we looked at that, rendering of what that new linear park under the Congress Street Bridge would look like in Troy. I just want to go out and play right now. And looked at that. 9th Street and 10th Street and 2nd Ave intersection. So this is the other side of the bridge looking at Waterloo. And this intersection currently is vast. It has large turning radii, long crosswalks because it accommodates a lot of bus and truck movement through the intersection. So we wanted to neck this down. This is obviously a pedestrian core within the city of Waterloo. It just doesn't function that way. So how do we bring this intersection down to more of a pedestrian scale? We would be able to eliminate one lane coming onto the bridge. So it would slightly narrow down that approach, and then putting in a pedestrian refuge island since it would still be the longest crosswalk. And then what we also recommended is these truck aprons. We need to have the larger turning radii to accommodate the buses and the trucks. But what it does is it encourages higher vehicular speeds when they're making those turns. By putting in those truck aprons, essentially the same type of apron you'd see on a roundabout, it forces vehicles to take the longer turn, have a narrow radii, and take that at a much slower speed, which is safer for pedestrians. Have the refuge island in here, and you can see the connection to the shared use path on the bridge. The southern connection to Hudson Shores Park. We went through a lot of different alternatives. We knew it needed to happen. The only connection to Hudson Shores Park is up here to the north, really at the northern end of the city of Waterloo, but it's such a great asset to the city. It's just not well connected to the majority of residents. So how do we do that? We considered an elevator or ramp off the bridge, but really this tunnel underneath 787 is what won out. Has support from New York State DOT, which is great. So we looked at a couple of different alternatives. How does it actually get installed? And discussing with DOT, the most cost effective and the best is actually an open cut installation of a box culvert. can be done more quickly, more cost effectively. The construction's gonna, make sure you've got a good solid base on 787 over the tunnel. We'd create an overlook in Hudson Shores Park, be the southern connection. So now you'd be able to do this loop through Hudson Shores Park and the new shared use path along Broadway, and connecting it up to Second Ave and the commercial district using protected bike lanes on 16th Street. So you can see what that connection would be. It'd be a great improvement for the city. Looking at 23rd Street, so there's northern access to gateway into Waterloo, northern access to Hudson Shores Park. It's it's not very well defined. It's very vehicular oriented. So how can we shorten crosswalks, clarify turning movements, reduce the amount of pavement space that's out there? So we looked at a couple of different alternatives, as I'll show you on the next slide, but what we came up with is really narrowing the roadway, creating some breaks, really cleaning up this green space. You can see this is all the space that can be reclaimed by just better defining what those turning movements are in those turning lanes. Shortening up some of the turning radii where possible. The biggest one, realigning this southbound exit ramp so it's more perpendicular to 23rd, to slow vehicular movements, have better sight distance, better define that pedestrian area, and also just narrowing up and better defining the entrance to Hudson Shores Park. So we did look at, different movements, doing like a median throughout it. We looked at a roundabout, actually a dog boat roundabout through here. It would create a nice gateway to Waterloo. But the alternative I showed on the first slide is what is preferred. And then we did look at, how do we really enhance this entrance into Hudson Shores Park, better define it, and create smooth bicycle and pedestrian connections into the parkway. So those are all the priority projects, went through very quickly. So we did the priority projects first, and then we looked at the general recommendations. What are all the recommendations that come along with this? I'll go through this really quickly. What we did develop is essentially all the priority projects make up the southern half of a loop trail, and there are already other pieces in place. So completing this loop trail, using the Green Island Bridge and the Congress Street Bridge. So there is, Steve, I'll let you talk about the Green Island Bridge. I'll move on from that. We did recommend this loop trail between the two communities, be about 2.5 mile loop trail. Then we looked at general recommendations within the city of Waterloo, using bicycle boulevards on local low volume streets, some traffic calming, relocating a signal, and also just where do we provide amenities like bike racks and bike fix-it stations, etc. So these were less detailed in the study, but we did include all of these general recommendations as well. And then same for Troy, looking at River Street, possibility of making that two-way, traffic calming throughout the city of Troy, more or less within the study area. Looking at the North-South Connections priority projects really covered the east-west, but what are those north-south connections that will connect into the new network, into linear park on the bridge? Looking at the alleyways, as well as two alternatives, whether that be lower volume streets like 2nd and 5th, or concentrating on 3rd and 4th, which are also the transit corridors and have more visibility. Also, located, had several recommendations for bicycle amenities. Really quick and dirty. There it is. Steve, you want to talk about what's next?
Yes, thank you, Lindsay. So, and I do want to just say, that while Lindsay and Joe covered the intermunicipal agreement, the intermunicipal cooperation and the project, I just needed to add that this process, it really was a great process that took Troy from just looking at removing the ramps on our side to this more holistic redevelopment of the area. Waterloo was a great partner. DOT, thanks for coming to all of our meetings. CDTA, my staff, James Rath and Andrew Kreshik. And I do want to just say Alta Planning really outdid themselves, not just on the concepts, but on the entire remote public outreach component and the speed with which we got that done. Even as we were waiting for funding for this project, Troy was working with Troy Housing Authority on doing putting an RFP on the street to redevelop the Taylor apartments, which were basically bisected by the Congress Street Bridge when it was put in the 70s. And we had told the respondents to consider their redevelopment in context of a reworked bridge and bridge ramps. And given that all we had at the time were some drawings on some napkins, they were kind of laughing at our ambitions. But we've come a long way with this project in a short time. With the onset of COVID, we pushed hard to get this study completed in time because we knew there was stimulus funding that would be coming. And we were, because we already had the Congress Ferry tip in place, we were rewarded with a 5.7 million member item if that bill ever passes, although I'm fairly certain the member items will not be kicked out of there. But when that 5.7 million allows us to do the bridge portion, as well as the intersections in Waterloo and the intersection at Congress and Ferry in Troy as well. So when that is passed, we'll be back before the planning committee to amend our existing Congress Ferry tip to account for the additional funding, and some changes to the original request, because Congress Ferry was basically a sidewalk and mill and fill project, and now we're looking at some other changes as well that might bump the cost up, bump the cost up a little bit. But when we have all the pieces in place, we hope to be fully into design on this project next year. And like I said, that's the intersections and the bridge as well. In Troy, the abandonment of Front Street's is going to take a little bit longer. The Penrose, who is redeveloping Taylor Housing, they will be working on the first project next year, which is really not impacted by the ramps. But when that's complete, they'll be able to demolish the two buildings between the river and River Street, and then redevelop that area as well. So when that happens, then we'll start looking at the Waterloo, or not the Waterloo, the Front Street portion as well, and continuing our river walk, which I always talk about the fact that our plan is to have a riverfront trail and river walk all the way from the Manans Bridge up to Waterford. And this is just another key, or to the Waterford Bridge. And this is another key component of that piece. So I guess the big takeaway here is the tip and the 5.7 million and how fast we were able to get that done, and getting this really into getting it moving so we can make some changes that were really just identified in our 2018 comprehensive plan. So I think that is more or less our presentation at this point, and so we're open to any questions. And thank you again, Lindsay and Joe. I'm not hearing anything.
And Sandy, the room's muted if there's.
We're still muted.
And are you okay now?
Can you hear us
Yep.
now?
Yes.
I think.
Thank you very much. Just thank you for your excellent overview on this important legacy improvement project for the cities of Waterloo, formerly known as West Troy and Troy. I wanted to start the conversation with a quick question on public-private partnerships. Steve, you mentioned the Penrose and Taylor side. And the Waterloo side, how about the Golub Corporation, and is it Walgreens, or what's the pharmacy, and other adjacent or contiguous public-private potential partners on the Waterloo side within the study areas? Have been any significant progress initiated there? Maybe
Unfortunately, Steve, nothing really came, with Golub or Nigro at this point. We do have interest with other areas and private partnerships there that hopefully will be some changes that'll be some catalyst projects to hopefully spur other things. We're also working in the Hudson Shores Park with the development of, a boat company and also a restaurant pad now. So we're hopeful that these come through fruition and, make that whole project come through.
Outstanding. Very good. We'll be watching it closely. Anyone else? Questions?
Don't put this project up to voter referendum.
Those for Mark.
That was the Bethlehem. Fleet Street.
Yeah, we heard the news this morning. You're right.
Well, this buoys my spirits then.
Like, why?
Just don't put it up to the voters. God forbid this project delays a minute of traffic.
Consensus can be built, as proven here at this table.
I love your optimism, Steve.
All right. Anyone else? Thank you. DOT support, DOS, great partnership, intermunicipal is a great paradigm for other projects in our region. Anyone else? We can move on. Next item.
Thank you, Lindsay. Could you release your screen, please? Thank you so much for your presentation today.
The audio is still holding up by hair. You can hear me through the mask. Next item, 3C, Charlie, is fiscal constraint discussion in the tip summary table 4, which is a continuing or running story here at this table every meeting. And Sandy and Jacob Beeman will overview. There's an update online on our cdtcmpo.org website. And is this current in our package that was mailed, Sandy?
Yeah,
Before?
so the version that's in your packet, Jacob, do you want to describe it?
Yep, so last month, the committee approved changes to the budget estimates to realign them with programming after we moved several projects to tip stiff performance. So our current table 4 that's shown up on the screen, and there's a link in the packet, is now within our 5% over under programming guidance. So as of now, we are good to go.
Thanks, Jacob.
Anyone from FHWA present? They like to see our 5-year balance. Any recent correspondence with that?
Interestingly, one of the things that may be changing with fiscal constraint, there is some movement at the national level to sort of eliminate this fiscal constraint policy by year. We'll see if that filters through Congress, but it may eliminate some of this discussion that we've had every month here. We'll see what happens.
By year, what do you mean?
So, you know, this table that we're showing has the balance by, we have to be constrained by fund source by year, within 5% over under. They may be eliminating that requirement and saying that you can, you don't have to do that basically anymore. We'll see if that, largely because this is sort of an administrative exercise and it really hasn't proven to be impactful in any major way.
What would be the check though?
What would be, I'm sorry?
What would be the check though? I mean, if
They would be
we're
with, so
over-
you would have the funding, you could use any funding within the 4-year period.
The collective at the end, the right, the program capacity over the length of the tip would be the metric. That's
Right.
it. Instead of artificially moving things within.
Okay,
years
so
to
it's
move something.
the bucket. It's the
Correct.
It's the
entire.
overall tip.
It's the overall budget, yeah. We'll see if that happens, but it would be beneficial because there's a lot of work that goes on to move projects around just to kind of fit in. It doesn't really, not very meaningful.
We've been doing this for more than 4 or 5 years, I believe. It goes back
Correct.
for a long time. Any further discussion on this item, fiscal constraint? Moving forward, next item 4, action items. First up is our 2019 through 24 TIP program amendments. Project A607 and 1085.46 is Route 146 over the Normanskill Bridge, the replacement of the Normanskill Bridge. Greg Wixers, oh, Bob?
I think Greg is remote.
Yeah, I can chime in here. So yeah, there's our another tip amendment to bring in a bridge selected from the statewide asset management teams to get after another replacement. So it's, you know, more good news for the area to get after some critical assets, and it brings about $5.2 million to the area to get this replaced. Hopefully, it should go to construction late next year, and then really construction will occur in 2023, is anticipated. But that's the long and the short of this. Are there any questions?
Questions around the table or online?
I see a hand up, Kenneth.
Hi, good morning. Yes, this is Kenneth Kowalczyk with the town of Guilderland. Good morning to everybody. The town is aware of this project. Thankful for DOT for looking at the 146 bridge. We were wondering if there's any design accommodations to maybe improve their pedestrian safety for crossing the bridge. That section of 146 gets a fair amount of traffic on a daily basis. Based on DOT's traffic data bureau, I believe there's about 12,100 vehicles a day traveling through that area. It is a primary truck route to the Northeastern Industrial Park. There's about 1,150 truck trips per day on that route, and it's also the main route getting in and out of the Guilderland High School in Guilderland Center. So you get a lot of school buses there. That is my primary commuting route to work every day. So it does get a decent amount of pedestrian traffic, walkers, cyclists, runners. So we would just be advocating for if there's any way that we can improve their pedestrian safety or design accommodations for pedestrian use over the bridge.
Oh, for sure. I mean, based on what you outlined there, our design guidelines require us to consider pedestrian bike use in the area. So if based on what you stated about the current use, I would wager it will include some improvements for those modes of travel as well. I'll definitely bring your comments back and make sure that they evaluate them. We actually have a meeting tomorrow on all our projects, so I'll bring that comment to them.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Good. Thank you, Ken Kowalczyk. Good one. Good input. Multimodal is key. Any other discussion before we vote on this item 4A in our agenda? Any other questions? Excellent overview. Thank you, Greg. Anything else? Items of concern. We're comfortable, ready to vote. We have motions to adopt. Thank you, Chris Wallen. 52nd by Steve Feeney. All in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. Any abstaining or opposed? Going once, going twice. Consensus carries. 4A is hereby adopted. 4A1, that is. 4A2 is moving to project R335 and 1761.71 County Route 68 from Route 65 Blooming Grove Drive to Peck Road. An overlay, and Joe Teleska or Rensselaer County may be available to present the overview. Is Joe online? Is Andrew Peterson online? Andrew?
Oh, you're behind us.
Keep it up on. Thank
Hi,
you.
Andrew.
Joe's not available, or you?
Joe's not available.
You comfortable doing a summary executive overview?
Sure.
Over dollars, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So in August, we asked for these two projects to be combined into one project. So we can get it out to bid and construct it this year. We did end up not being able to do that. We used county funds to do the one section of the roadway, and we'll do the second section next year as we plan. So basically, the Snyder's Lake Road section of it completed. We're not coming back to that.
Thank you for that. Any questions for Andrew, Rensselaer County? We're comfortable to vote now on item 2. 4A2. Motion to adopt the Kreshak, second by Sean McGuire. All in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Any abstaining or opposed? Going once, going twice, hearing none. The item's adopted. Thank you very much. Yeah, next item up.
Before we move on, I don't think we, in the chaos of getting the meeting started, ever did introductions for the roll call. So if you don't mind us taking a minute, we just want to make sure we have everybody accounted for. So we'll start here in the room.
I introduced myself, your chair, Steve Iacetta. We'll go to my left, Bob Rice.
Bob Rice, New York State DOT. Lorenzo, staff member, New York State DOT. Peter Menzel, rather
Steve Beanie, Schenectady County.
Chris Wallen, City of Schenectady.
Sean McGuire, Town Colony.
Paul Farrell, CDTC. Andrew Prushick, City of Troy.
And Yagowski, County Springfield.
Mark Castiglione, CDRPC.
Mike Valentine, Saratoga County.
Starting on that wall there.
Good morning, Abe Tracy, CDTC.
Jesse McGray, City of Cohoes.
Andrew Peterson, Rutherford County.
Jacob Beeman, CDTC.
Chris Bauer, CDTC.
And Sandy Missowitz, CDTC. I will just read online. We have Chris Kate with McFarland Johnson, Jen Saponis, CDTC, John Scavo, Town of Clifton Park, Kristen Diat, City of Schenectady, Laura Robertson, Town of Niskayuna, Greg Wixer, NISDOT, Elizabeth Cormos, Village of Boston Spa, Lisa Ramondo, Albany County, Susan Barden, Saratoga Springs, Joe LaCivita, City of Waterloo, Steve Schreikman, City of Troy, Lindsay Zepting, Alta Planning, Jeff Scheinberg, Creighton Manning Engineering, Teresa LaSalle, CDTC, Jamie O'Neill, Town of Malta, Terry Ward, CDTC, Mark Surdom, Town of Huzik, Ted Kowalczyk, Town of Guilderland, Melissa Cherubino, Town of Glendale, Joe Savino, CHA, and Melissa Shanley from CDTA. Did we miss anybody?
Anyone online not called? I think we have everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Apologies again, the audio difficulties was a little bit off the first 5 minutes.
Yes.
Apologies. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, everyone, once again, for taking time out of your busy schedules. Moving forward with our action items, agenda Roman 4. Next up is the Unified Planning Work Program, UpWP Progress and Expenditure Report for the CDTC for this period, April 1st, 2021 through September 30th of this year. And Sandy will give us the overview.
I will. Thank you, Steve. So per tradition and per federal requirements, we have to put together a 6-month progress report. And in this last 6 months, the New York State Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations worked with Federal Highway Administration and the FDA, as well as NISDOT, to develop a uniform format for these, what we used to call a progress report, but it's been renamed now the Performance and Expenditure Report. So you'll see that for those that have been around here for a while, this is more streamlined version of our progress report. It is more succinct in terms of establishing and reviewing our progress on each UPWP task, which obviously represents the bulk of our planning work that we undertake here at CDTC. You'll see that there's a new table showing the status of expenditures, which includes how much federal highway planning funds and how much federal transit administration planning funds have been programmed and expended in the planning period that we're looking at. A few highlights of our progress for this last 6-month period. First off, we've done a lot of work in the arena of equity. We've done a lot of expansion in terms of how we do our public involvement on linkage studies to include limited English populations, environmental justice populations, ensuring that we're doing the best we can to include those underrepresented groups in our planning process. We're nearly completed a transportation and race and poverty report. We hope to have that available in the next 6 months. We are very active in the New York State Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, providing statewide guidance, best practices, information exchange, peer exchange, being heavily involved with the main office of DOT through that association. In addition, we have funded or completed 5 technical assistance program projects with in partnership with the California Regional Planning Commission. We are working on 6 linkage study projects. Work on those continues. We've invested a lot of time in our highway condition inventory, completing work in under contract to the Albany County, to the City of Albany, and also collecting the non-state federal aid data for our region. We have completed and hosted 6 webinars as part of our New Visions Regional Transportation Plan Learning Series. We intend to continue doing webinars and virtual learning using the Zoom webinar platform. We are also nearing the end of the development of a Complete Streets Design Guide, which we hope will be a tool that folks, particularly local governments, can have as a resource as they think about how to approach complete street design in their communities. We've initiated the development of a smart communities toolbox. We continue with our capital coexist mini grants program. We've initiated the Patroon Greenway feasibility study for a trail here in Albany County. Heavy investment in our Clean Communities program. And as you all know, sitting at this table, we've spent a lot of time in this last 6 months developing our materials and tools for the update of the transportation improvement program that we'll be working on in the next few months. So that's just a brief set of highlights of our work. We do have to take an action to approve this expenditure report as it gets passed on to our partner agencies. And so we're looking for a motion to accept, adopt, approve the expenditure report.
Excellent overview. Any questions for Sandy on the expenditure report and performance for this, the last half of the fiscal year for 21, right? Very busy time, very challenging, and
Yes,
moving forward.
I did fail to mention this covers the period from April 1st, 2021 through to the end of September of 2021.
Any questions, Adam?
Comments, just minor stuff. It might help page numbers.
Yes, we noted that after we printed it. Thank you.
But also maybe like a table of contents with the tasks, and where they are located here to give you, an overview. And then, I mean, I would suggest too, maybe, and not, being new, relatively new, does it make sense to have like a summary table for expenditures across the entire, UpWP? So like summarizing, the programmed and expended for each of the fund sources.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Since this is the first time we've been doing this, I don't think, even NorthSouth is still thinking through the format of this. But
Okay.
we'll take that suggestion. Thank you, Adam.
It's evolving nicely. We see UpWP forever, going back decades. And this is an advancement on our reporting, I believe, and so we can further perfect it.
Yep.
Excellent input. Any other comments or discussion before we vote?
All the same type of money?
It's all our federal highway planning funds as well as our federal transit administration planning funds. that are
That's just those two, that is
just
the
those two
designation
fund
right there.
sources. Yep.
So then, to your point, if there was a larger table at the back that just had that categorized, it, then since the funds essentially line up for all of them, that's what you're thinking.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Are those two funding sources combined or are they separate for separate things?
They're separate.
Okay,
We
so-
track them separately because they're actually 2 different grant programs for CDTC. So that's why you see them listed separately.
So that table would then be split into under the funding source. that-
Yeah, we probably have the list of program tasks and then an FTA column and an FHWA column. That's probably what we're gonna do.
There's a couple of tasks in there that I see that don't have any money assigned to them. How can they get reported in here if they're not covered by it?
So interestingly, in trying to honor this new format, we have some unique scenarios here where we have contracted work with communities. Colony as an example, since you raised it, where we're doing work on your behalf and you're paying us as a contractor to do that work. Because that's local funds, we were told that we don't need to report that in this because they don't necessarily care about that, right? We care about it here. So we have debated whether we should include that as an additional item in here, and we may go back to doing that if that would be helpful for the committee.
It's information for the planning committee.
It's informational for you folks.
You'd like to see it, Sean, and others?
I just wondered, because if the purpose of the report is to report on the expenditure of the funds, and there's tasks in there that have no funds being expended, so I'm actually maybe trying to make the work a little later. I don't know.
Yeah, we were trying to respect what federal Highway and FTA cared about, which is their grants. But we contract with, formed locally, they don't necessarily care about.
It's something that's tracked internally by you
Correct.
readily, so it's not additional work. It would just be dumping it.
Yeah, and we could certainly insert that information
That way-
as an
that way-
additional.
Yeah, that way you have everything balanced.
That's the essence of our planning committee mission. Are we strictly in federal only, or are we overall CDTC?
Right. Yep. And we are, as an entity, certainly you'll see different, when you do the work for the update of the UpWP, the Unified Planning Work Program, you'll see all the resources, including.
Therefore, we should see the whole picture, local plus federal, state.
Yeah.
The full gamut.
And don't be surprised, NISDOT is still reviewing this expenditure report format, so it may change when we, looking at Bob only because you're representing DOT today, not that you have anything to do with it, but it's a work in progress, as we mentioned. So,
Involving, it's progress, good.
Just like all the sponsors, CDTC also submits payment requests and they get complicated sometimes.
They definitely do. We are not the easiest NPO to deal with, let's put it that way, in the state of New York.
There's a lot going on.
We have a lot of
Progress to show
initiatives.
for it.
Absolutely.
Any other discussion before we vote on item 4B? Unified expenditure report? Make motion to approve. Thank you, Mark. Moves, second by Sean. All in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. Any abstaining or opposed? Going once, going twice. Moves forward. Next is the UPWP amendments for Charlie, 4C. And Sandy's gonna overview a few tweaks on this.
Yeah, so as I mentioned in my earlier reporting, the staff here has spent a tremendous amount of time developing the tools and materials for the TIP update. On the budget side of the house, we have gone over budget already in our TIP line item. Frankly, I don't think enough money was put in to that line item when we budgeted for the TIP task 2 years ago, remembering that that's a 2-year UPWP that we currently have. So we needed to make some budget adjustments, pulling from the tasks that you see here. Please note, I did make a typo. The task 4.60 capital coexist, we're not taking funding from that one. That shouldn't have been in there. But the other 5 tasks, infrastructure, financial planning, regional signal timing, HSA transportation, regional transportation demand management effort, and the safety planning effort, we're going to pull some money from those tasks for the remaining 6 months of this planning period to put towards the TIP line item. So this action just requires you folks to approve it. The table reflects the financial impacts of those changes, but it essentially beefs up our staff time on the transportation improvement program update.
Any questions for Sandy before we vote on this item, which are minor adjustments as Sandy outlined, and the table is key to see those adjustments. Relatively minor, they are all minor, but it's important to address the needs of the tech, right?
Right.
Yeah.
This might have already been addressed. I don't know if it might not be related to this vote, but the current UPWP solicitation had 2 different amounts for the linkage study portion. One said 200,000 and one said up to 100,000. And I was just wondering if that was clarified or what the actual amount is for the current solicitation.
It's 200,000. I'll have to find where you found the 100,000. I thought we caught all that. It must be typo, but it is 200,000.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure. It was just listed in 2 different places in the solicitation. But yeah, thanks for clarifying that.
Point. Thank you. Any other discussion? We're all comfortable voting on these minor amendments to the UPWP expenditure plan. Motion to adopt these changes. Motion by Ross Farrell. Thank you. Second by Steve Feeney. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any abstaining or opposed? Going once, going twice, moving forward. Consensus carries into item D Delta 2021 Technical Assistance Program. This is the Castleton on Hudson project proposal and Mark Castiglione, Regional Planning Board.
Sure, this is a continuation of a successful technical assistance program. This is sort of what has sort of been crystallizing into a template assistance project, a demographic analysis and existing conditions analysis as a prelude to a comprehensive or other kind of planning process. So the Village of Castleton is in need for that kind of stuff, and we'll happily give it to them in partnership with CDTC.
So it's a good paradigm of the TAP.
Yes. The TAP.
Not to be confused with the other tab.
Alphabet soup. No, it's great. It's a great program. Any questions for Mark on this project proposal, sent in the advanced agenda? So it's planning. This is 14,
It's a-
numbers are here.
Yep, it's a $14,000 total project commitment with about 4,400 in-kind services being provided by the village.
Very good.
Was this solicited or was this just a approach?
This
No.
is part of the, sorry,
So it's just an ongoing solicitation as part of the
Okay,
technical
this is
assistance
what
program.
you've done before.
Yeah, it's not it's an example of a project that we certainly put out there in the guidelines. But as in terms of our gaining experience delivering these kind of projects, estimating the budgets, understanding what they need, we've kind of made a template that can deliver this project pretty easily.
When it says ultimately you provide a comparison to other communities in the area, certain villages and communities want to retain a certain aesthetic or culture that they've historically had. Do you gear your final report to that, or do you just present it in a comparable manner to what's around?
Well, we have to balance objectivity with the interest of the client. So if the client wants certain comparisons to certain communities, we'll accommodate that. We would try to encourage them to compare themselves to communities that have commensurate populations or, demographic profiles. Because the interest there is typically, if they're going into a comprehensive plan process, is what's happening in my town substantially different from what's happening in other towns? So to answer that question, you really want to look at, other towns, but you want to look at other towns that are sort of in the same space. So I would not necessarily use the city of Saratoga Springs as a comparison to what's going on in the Village of Castleton. But we probably take a look at like Ravenna, Boston Spa, some other small villages as a comparison.
Sure good. This is a voting item. Are we ready to vote? Everyone's comfortable? Steve Beanie, Chris Wallen, second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any abstaining or opposed? Going once, going twice, and we move forward. Next up is Roman numeral 5, discussion items.
Just one more thing before we leave the technical assistance program, because we had jointly with CDRPC, we had December 1st as sort of the endpoint for accepting applications for this year. So because of our lack of staff here, we're kind of tapped out in terms of what we can take on, given we're getting into the TIP update. We are going to shut down the application process for the TAP, our technical assistance program, until we'll restart it again in April. So just wanted to let you all know that.
Good. Thank you, Sandy. Sure. Okay, item 5 now into discussion items, and the first there is tip amendments and air quality conformity requirements. Changes to that, Sandy?
Yeah, so Chris Bauer, who in this case is our air quality, there you are.
I don't know if you want me to sit here.
You are welcome to, is going to provide a presentation today to the group on just an educational opportunity related to our air quality conformity status. So I'm going to turn the computer here over to Chris and
Get to the desk.
take that down.
No, this actually does not relate directly to CMAC. Okay, another.
All right, great. Are we sharing the
Are we
screen
sharing?
folks online?
Spirit first. Sorry about that.
Audio still working for everyone online? Speak up. We can't hear you.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Little screen in the upper left is what you gotta go.
I gotta get back to that.
So you maximize it. There you
All right.
It's a lot of pressure to be in the practice chair.
And
You gotta go right up to there.
Screen here.
Don't click those X's. Just click to the left in that black space, right there. That'll go.
All right. Hey, 9 minutes first. I want to get to the presentation mode.
Well, everyone has been expert in like 5 different platforms now too.
There we go. People online can see the presentation now, right?
No.
No, not yet.
Yeah, share. And then go to presentation. mode.
Yeah.
We're gonna face that line.
But it's not on that's not the presentation. Oh. It's already on. There we go.
There it is.
All right, sorry about that.
Online can see the presentation now.
Yes, it's loading.
It's a little
Great, great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we're going to talk about air quality conformity today. And really, this is about how we comply with our federal requirements for air quality conformity. And
Sorry, Chris, it looks like the screen is just dark. It's not showing the slide, so I don't know if it's the wrong screen or wrong.
All right, let's see.
It was just sharing like a blank screen. Now we can see it, thanks.
All right, thank you. So yeah, this is how we comply with the Clean Air Act and meet our federal requirements for air quality. So one thing that I wanted to make very clear, since I think there's a lot of confusion on, is our current air quality designation. Right as of today, CDTC's designation is not attainment for the 1997 National Ambient Air Quality Standards and an attainment for all other national ambient air quality standards, which is in our case, the 2008 standard. Sometimes you hear this referred to as an orphan area, which is a term that was coined in the legal arena from the South Coast Air Quality Management District versus EPA case in 2018. So when this case happened, things changed for us and there was new requirements and things that we had to do. So I wanted to talk about the different actions and triggers that affect this group. You know, a lot of these things happen in the background, but some of these could affect your schedules as you're planning for projects. So we just want to be totally upfront and aware of those. So one action that we take is ICG consultation, and I'll get into what the ICG is in a moment. And that applies to tip amendments. And when it applies is for all new projects. In other words, if the project does not have a tip number, and now it does, we have to do ICG consultation. And so that applies like when we have drawdowns on set-asides or other new projects that come in, like the ones that I use as an example later, or substantial changes in scope. So in other words, if you are paving a road and you're changing the limits, that doesn't matter for air quality. If you are changing fund sources, doesn't matter for air quality. But if you decided now, instead of paving the road, we want to change from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, that would be a substantial change in scope. And then the other action that we can take is to update our conformity determination. And the times that we have to do that is when we have a new TIP, a new long-range plan, or a new non-exempt project. And I'll go through each one of those. If you're really interested in this and you like reading it, this is all from the Federal Register. This is all federal requirements, but this is sort of a digest of that. So the ICG is, you'll hear that term a lot, the Interagency Consultation Group, made up of EPA, FHWA, FTA, DEC, and DOT. And we coordinate with the ICG through DOT's Environmental Sciences Bureau. When we do that for, as I said, tip amendments, we review all tip amendments and we coordinate with the ICG as needed. Now, what does consultation mean? So consultation is, one, deciding whether a project is exempt or not exempt. And we have these exempt codes that we use.
The codes are proposed by CDTC staff. You'll see these on the tip amendments on future agendas as you did for this one. The codes can be found in our tip document in Appendix K. I did print some copies and put them out there too, for those of you in the room. Whenever possible, we try to define a project as exempt. That's sort of a simpler route. Most CDTC projects are exempt. Repaving, reconstructions, anything that's there and you're replacing it the way it was is exempt. Replacing a bridge, most transit projects, safety projects, and many, many others. Non-exempt projects require to take an additional step, which is updating our conformity determination document. And that examples of a project would be, and these are relatively rare in our region, but an entirely new roadway, adding capacity, adding a lane to a roadway, a major transit expansion. So like, more than 10% increase in their fleet or something like that, or a new light rail line or something like that. And to use an example from today, so we had that one for the new DOT bridge replacement project in Gilroy. So when we looked at that, that's pretty straightforward. It's replacing a bridge that's already there, not going to add any additional lanes. We applied, in this case, exempt code A19, which is widening narrow bridges, widening narrow pavements with reconstructing bridges with no additional ground lanes. Too small to see, but it is in that first column there on the sheet. So the sort of bigger step that we have to take some time is updating our conformity determination document. And as I said, that's when we have a totally new TIP, so we'll be doing that. That's one of the steps we'll be taking when we update our TIP next year. When we have a new long-range plan, we did it last year when we did the new Vision 2050 update, or when we have a new non-exempt project. And that process includes updating the document that you see here on the right. It's our conformity determination narrative. It requires us to coordinate with our neighbors to the north, Adirondack Glens Falls, MPO, and DOT's Region 1, 2, and 9, which are all in our greater air quality region. Then we send the updated document to ICG, and there's also a public review period. And then MPO adoption, and then FHWA and FDA approval. So this is really important because if you are bringing to us a new non-exempt project, you need to build in this time into the process. Because depending on when you come in and when the meetings fall, we have to have 60-day public review. And we have to have MPO adoption, meaning policy board adoption. So depending on where you come in, we're talking usually about a couple of months for this process. So the ICG consultation is usually about a couple of weeks. Conformity determination, a couple of months, but exactly how much time depends on where you come in. So that's all I had, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
The review in the last part that you started talking about, that involves you internally only. It's not like you're talking about action to be taken by the planning committee.
So when there is, when you approve a TIP amendment and it has the air quality code on there, you are approving that, so you are taking some action on it. We generally do the work of trying to assign those. Of course, if the sponsor wants to propose one, of course, we would work with you. We try to kind of take the path of least.
I'm just thinking there's no triggers within that. When you're saying 60 days review, that there's no triggers in there that require this board to take action separate from the adoption of the TIP later.
So actually, when you do adopt the TIP, you are one of those kind of like when we do the long motions. One of those actually is to first
long motion.
One of those is to release that document for public review. So you do take action on that document, and when that happens, it's included in your package.
We're getting some new information, I believe, in our items voted on even today, noting air quality proposed exempt code in our items. So we'll see that now moving forward in each and every action item, including TIP adoption. Right? Okay. Any other questions for Chris Bauer on this excellent overview of an essential prerequisite for all our funding, is the way I see it.
There's no long motion required for this.
No, not today.
As long as you
There will
like,
be,
Michael, as long as you
Very
like. I vote for the streamlined paperwork reduction act. There's 4 versions of the paperwork reduction act still on the books, by the way. Okay, motion to, there's not a voting on this.
No motion
This is
needed.
discussion. Thank you, Chris, for a good overview, Sandy. It's excellent and important information. So next up is the item B, 2022 to 27 tip update status. And Sandy's giving us an overview.
Yeah, so I don't have any presentation materials. This is more of a verbal update today. If you haven't been paying attention, we still do not have an infrastructure bill at the federal level. News outlets are reporting that a vote could happen as early as the end of this week. Whether that happens or not is anybody's guess. The federal government did extend the surface transportation funding through December 3rd, so that allows everybody to continue operating. It remains to be seen what the implications of this will be for the Transportation Improvement Program update. From the DOT perspective, we have not heard anything new. I don't know, Bob, if you have heard anything new internally?
Yeah, I mean, along those same lines, we still have not received program update instructions or depending on what the new federal language is, what the fund sources look like, what the requirements are. So, well, we've got plenty of candidates in the queue. You know, what the framework looks like, it's still not there. So
Yep.
It's making it complicated.
Yes, it's gonna really make, just create a huge time crunch on all of us to move through the tip update no matter what happens. We are still going to go with a December 3rd submission deadline for new candidate projects. Staff here is available to answer any questions sponsors might have. If you'd like to discuss your proposal, we're also willing to do that as well. So keep those things in mind. We did want to talk a little bit about the post column projects today. You should have received an email from us if you are one of the folks who has a project in what we're calling the post tip. I'm going to share my screen real quick, and I just lied, I do have presentation materials. I'll share my screen so folks can see what those projects are. Here. So these are organized. We'll post this up on our website just so you have the information, but these are organized by tip ID number, but there's a range of projects. One dating as far back as 1993 through the 1998 tip, which is the Southwick bypass, and a series of them that were added in our last tip update as well. These sponsors have been asked to resubmit a project application if they want commitment to be. They want these projects to be brought into the 5-year tip. If we don't see a project proposal, they're going to be removed from the post column because there is no commitment on the part of CDTC to those projects. So as I said, we'll make this available on our website. But what we wanted to discuss with you today is we did a little research on how other NPOs use the post column. And what we found out is we are a little different. What you're seeing on your screen right now, let's see if I can shift this down a little bit, is a summary that we put together of all of the NPOs and minus us, of course, and how they're handling the post tip column in their project listing. So Andrew Tracy, do you want to give?
Yeah, I'm over here.
Oh, there you are, sorry. A quick overview of what you learned.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. I was asked to look at the tips for the other 13 New York MPOs, and we summarized that here in this table to see what the post-tip practices are around the state. So most MPOs have some kind of a post-tip column for the years following the 5 years of the tip. However, what I found is that most MPOs don't use that column. There's no projects have any funding in that column. For the MPOs that did have funding in the column, it was pretty rare, and it appeared to only happen on multi-year projects that would have maybe design and right of way in the first 5 years of the TIP and then the construction in the following years, or it happened occasionally on things like state-led maintenance programs or transit programs that would have a little bit of funding in every single year, and then they put a little funding in the post-TIP years as well. So I was looking around for something similar to the post-TIP that we have, which is a list of essentially projects for which funding is not yet available. And some MPOs had lists, they were mostly called illustrative projects, kind of a wish list of projects that's prepared in case there is a windfall of funding. So places like AGFTC, Binghamton, Buffalo, and a couple of others, Syracuse, Watertown, they had these illustrative lists. Some MPOs just had one or two big ticket projects, that are sort of bigger than the MPO's funding availability. But a couple of MPOs had a laundry list of projects as well. So most notably, I couldn't find any MPOs that did something similar to what we do, which is where they'll take a project and they'll put all of the funding into the post years, design, construction, everything into the post years. And the rare cases where an MPO had funding in that post year column, it was always preceded by usually several years of planning, design, right of way. The expectation was that the pre-construction activities would take many years, and so the construction was then put into the post-TIP column. So that's all summarized here in this table. If anybody has any questions about that, I'll turn things back over to Sandy now.
Thanks, Andrew. What I'm showing on the screen, the MPOs that are highlighted in yellow represent our peers. And what I mean by that is the larger MPOs, those that are similar size or larger than us. And as you can see, this is the Genesee Transportation Council in Rochester. They don't even have a TIP, post-TIP column. As Andrew mentioned, the Buffalo MPO has one. They don't use it the way we do. And it really is limited to parking some set aside money that is sort of routine maintenance that we have every year in that post column. NIMTIC, New York City MPO, has it, and they do park some what I'll call estimated construction funding in the post TIP, but they never put a project in the post TIP that's not has some project phase in the 5-year program. So the point we're trying to make here is staff here feels that over the last 10 years, the purpose of the post column somehow changed and became a parking spot for projects that we say right in the TIP, they don't have any standing. To my knowledge, and I looked back up to 20 years, we've never funded a project from the post column, even with new funding when it becomes available. And a project like Exit 3, if you go all the way back to the 1993 TIP when it was first put on, guess what was in the 5-year period? Design. So, and they parked construction funding in the post-TIP column. So somehow over time, we've kind of veered one way and all the other MPOs have been handling this differently.
They had to pay the design money back because it was not done within 10 years.
Exactly. So the point being here is, staff would like to discuss this. This is not up for a vote today, but we wanted you guys to think about what we wanted to do with the post column moving forward. So one of the things, a couple of things to think about is we could develop some criteria and specify how that post column is used in the TIP, reserving some discretion for special situations. Obviously, there's things that come up that we can't predict. We could limit use of the post column for very large projects that require construction funds that are beyond the available resources here at this table. So an example of that might be the 378 bridge, where we know that we're working on the planning study now. Maybe in another couple of years, we'll need some design work done. Perhaps that gets added to the TIP through the process, and the post column becomes an estimated construction figure, just to illustrate that this is the resources that are going to be necessary for this very large project. Usually projects, what we noted, and we'll do a little more research on this with the other MPOs, it's usually the design phase or the right-of-way acquisition phase that get in the TIP in the 5-year period with the estimated construction costs put in the post column. We could also provide more information in the TIP document. So right now, we do have an appendix that lists all of our unfunded candidates. So if you look back at the 2019 TIP, you actually will find a list of all the TIP projects that we didn't program last time. We could sort of enhance that table by including the cost estimate and the benefit cost ratio. And we could, instead of calling it an illustrative set of projects, which make it also kind of sound like to us staff anyway, like a wish list. And we don't want it to be a wish list. What we do want to reflect is if an opportunity arises, and the Department of Transportation has said, you've gained access to some of the federal funds that are set aside statewide because maybe it wasn't used in other parts of the state and is now available for projects. There would be these lists of projects with the evaluation results right in the tip that we could draw on if those opportunities do arise. So those are just food for thought. We can think about it some more as we build a new TIP, but I think our message to you is we feel that the post-tip column may be giving sponsors a false impression of the status of projects and that those projects really, quote, aren't real. And they really don't have any additional standing here. So, any thoughts or discussion on that?
Yeah, I think the history you presented, that none of the post-tip projects that have ever been resurrected speaks volumes.
Was Baxterville Bridge once in the post-tip?
Oh, gosh, it was in a lot of places.
Yeah. No, exit 3 is not
yes.
the only
I just use that as an example.
post-tip. I respectfully differ with that history being here in 40 years.
Okay. But
There were other large major projects.
In the sense of that, Steve,
Yeah.
the key word there is large and very significant. And I think having to continue a post-tip report in the manner in which it has for the past decades doesn't really serve the purpose for which it has been. Special projects can be called out, but they don't have to be carried forward to such a degree that, I mean, the numbers are going to get skewed as we move into a 5-year cycle, then a 10-year cycle. It can be adjusted, but it's a special circumstance. Now, for other projects that exist on there that haven't been moved on, the minor, less major projects, let's say, just don't see a need. If they're
You're
viable.
debating whether or not to have a wish list. You think a wish list is not beneficial?
Well, I think what we're trying to point out is it's not so much a wish list, it's how it's presented. And the issue is that it appears, and we'll continue to dig into this, but none of the other MPOs are adding projects and putting dollars in a post column that don't already have a project phase in the 5-year tip. Not one of them. We're the only ones that do
I
that.
was gonna ask you, when you made these calls and inquiries, did any of the other MPOs say, hey, that's a great idea, maybe we should consider doing that?
No. To be fair, we're presenting the facts that we researched by looking at their tip documents. Our next step is we are going to talk to the other MPOs and actually find out what their thinking is on the post-tip column and why they are useful.
Sandy, can you put that graphic back up?
Sure, yeah.
It's very interesting. Keep us on par. The CDTC has been a leader in policy implementation in this regard. Yes, but you're saying no one's following. No one's following the leader.
Well, I think what I think the staff here is concerned with is when we seeing projects that have been carried since the 1990s and there's been no movement. Are they real projects? Is there a real commitment to them? And even ones that have been added. Oh, the other list, I'm sorry.
Unfunded projects is, I think this is an important discussion going forward. I like the recognition of the projects that are submitted for consideration to the next tip, things that don't make it above the line. It's good to have an acknowledgement of those lists as sort of unmet need, a backlog of sort of infrastructure. They're sort of identified right then. In terms of this list, almost as old as the Selkirk bypass is the, Five Corners project. And, very purposely after, Sandy's letter, I mean, we're going to let those roll off as sponsors. They just are not reflective of the preservation first type approach. Five Corners in particular, I mean, there's been lots of discussion, and it may come as a project through a solicitation or, so it still, it doesn't mean it's not a real project. It just should not lie out there as a wish list because we don't, I mean, quite frankly, you mentioned 378, but some of these larger initiatives of carving out a piece for that design work to even get that real, sometimes we're not competitive in national solicitations because some of our bigger projects are not far enough down the design lines. And that has been identified several times over the last couple of years. So,
Thought, can I interrupt you on that one? Because that's what I was gonna try to transition is I don't know about this list, but the city doesn't have anything on this list right now, but one of the projects now that we're talking, we had an internal meeting with Steve, myself, the mayor, and, we're trying to break things into categories of, where do we think they're gonna go? Because, it's similar to the T&I memorandum where all of a sudden you get some money, city got some money. If you don't have these projects at some level, and I don't know if it's linkage, but I haven't heard of this design and then post tip. And, we had a meeting, Bob, right pre-COVID about, I'm really getting a lot more ground roots effort about relocating of exit 4. There's a lot of development going on. Exit 4 is seen as this highway in the middle of our downtown now. It was never seen like that, but now it is. And it's, I don't know if that's a tip project at this point, but if right now, if that infrastructure bill were to pass and there's money, I have nothing. I don't have anything. I don't have a linkage report. I have nothing to do. And so am I allowed to put a design into the tip for a project and then something into the post tip so it has some kind of a standing? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, you can do that, but as Steve noted, the trick is the minute you do that and you obligate that design, you're on the 10-year clock.
Yeah, I wrote that. I mean, but once again, that may be the gamble that you have to take.
That is the risk, right?
That you do. I mean, the DOT would have to be some kind of a partner on it, but I'm just, then you're saying that this is something that we feel strongly about and we put it on there. I don't know if these projects fall into that category, but we're not prepared. And I don't know if it's a linkage study, because on the T&I, we check boxes, is it on the tip? Yes. Do you have a study? Yeah. It was a very strong candidate. We're checking boxes. Same thing with TAP CMAC. But this large project that now we see is very important to the downtown, I can't check any boxes. Is it an idea? Yes. But where do you go? And it's so big with so many things. I don't know how to put it where it belongs.
Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, when the department put forth the planning study for the 378 bridge, we put that on through the tip update last time around.
just as a study.
Just for the study, not for the project. But to your point, what it would do for something of the scale you're describing is give you the information you would need to figure out where you're going from there.
Yeah, and that's almost an important sort of, in working with Federal Highway, the Pell sort of discussion, that really doesn't trigger the NEPA clock in the 10-year sort of element. That has sort of shelf life beyond that, and you have a definitive deliverable product that doesn't start the NEPA clock, which is really where the 10-year rule sort of comes from, is that all of your research and stuff becomes stale after, then you need to redo it anyway.
Is there?
So,
I'm sorry, I'm not.
but that's, I mean, that was very purposeful in the reason. I mean, around this table, we programmed just that scoping or Pell study for 378. But you're right, at some point, for a couple $100 million bridge replacement, that's a lot of it. That would be a given year of any of our allocations, just to program the design for anything.
Is there a shelf in the UPWP? When we're looking at planning funds, is there a shelf that we can put a category that just says, don't call it wish list, but these are things that have been looked at by the planning committee. These are things that are up for consideration. These are estimated X dollars, and this is the schedule. And then it doesn't have to go into the tip per se in a column out there, but particularly if you're doing a 6-month review like we just did, it's always there in front of everybody every 6 months.
It's making a memo.
Well,
Here's the things we talked about.
you know, you got a sweater in your closet that you haven't worn for 10 years, you can donate. You know, these are old things, and the viability of them is limited. I know that our 3 projects up there, they're probably gonna go. One was a roundabout that just never got traction. Sidewalks, I mean, the estimates are shot.
Marie,
All the-
Marie Kondo, all the projects.
All the engineering that goes toward it, it would have to be redone. I mean, it's just, and the fact that it was looked at 10 years ago doesn't mean that I need it to be on a shelf somewhere to be reconsidered maybe in the future and given priority because it was suggested in the past.
It's like what I tell my wife when I leave my two kids alone to themselves. It's a self-regulating system. The ones that are successful will rise to the top. They'll always come back.
Well, I think it's
Little
our,
social Darwinism in your household.
I mean, I'm
it's our nature to
looking,
hold on to these.
I'm looking at this list here. There's only 2 DOT projects, right? So you've got the Selkirk bypass and then you have 5 corners. You know, you've got a $6 million project and an $8 million project. That's estimates, probably a little bit higher.
That
than that.
estimate's probably from the 90s, yes.
Yeah.
At least from my recollection, the Carmen Curry Road roundabout was in the post-tip. And all of a sudden, there was money available. We were able to drag that into the 5. And it was done.
Maybe we're putting a false correlation that its resurrection was a result of being in the post-tip. I'm not sure.
Well, I think it was a lot easier,
But it's in a
done.
collective memory somewhere.
All right, I think the
The other
point of the
number,
collective
the other
memory,
area
we're
was
not,
dragging into the.
Nobody went to this list and say, okay, we got some money, let's pick one of those.
Again,
That's-
let's go back here since none of the post-tip items have been done in the 20 years. When has this extra money become available as well?
With Obama.
For it? Have you?
Where the our money come from?
Yeah, the R,
Other than that.
No, not other than that. That's critical.
well, the hour money, when I look back at where the hour money
What
went,
did everybody around here do when that money became available? The word was, go get your projects. Where did your projects come from? The ones that had failed to be approved before, the ones that sat around, the ones that weren't able to pass the muster at the time. And just as you're saying, I gotta have something to throw out there. I gotta have plans.
What is the oldest project that was resurrected under this,
Andrew, I haven't got the 5 years idea on that. We're sitting here debating back and forth. You know, take your sweater, throw it out, take your kids, throw them in a room. You know, it's just like, everybody has a project. You will have a project sometime that you're gonna want on that list. And it could have been, you know, one of these before you were here, so that project made it up there. For that, right then, that made sense for whoever was presenting it. Right now, you don't have anything up there. You're gonna take an argument on one way. Somebody else is gonna look at it and say, geez, I don't have a darn thing. I don't need this right now.
I'm just saying that it should be the sponsor's responsibility to maintain the relevance of the project.
That's a
not
possibility,
CDTC.
and the sponsors, the people sitting around the table here representing the sponsor in a long-term period are going to change. The elected people sitting back in that municipality are gonna change. That collective memory thing doesn't exist for the elected people or the staff people representing the project. I'm not sitting here myself saying one way or the other, but I think there has to be something in some way that sits there, hey, guys, we've talked about something like this before. Hey, there's a possibility from about this. Let's say Obama, what's his name? Biden. He comes up with some kind of funding again that's available, same way as ARA before. Everybody's got to rush to something. But they're gonna be like, here, you're just sitting here saying, I don't have anything to present.
Are these the right things to rush for, that it's sitting on the table for so long?
yeah,
Haven't
no.
priorities shifted and changed?
my question about the list, I guess, as I'm looking at it, is just misleading is, did all of these people put in the last tip to keep it on, or did you just, is this a list that's like a conglomerate? Because I see, like, I would start with, the 1924, Ross, you're on here, I don't know if Clifton Park, well, they're on there, but did all these other people put in to say, like, we want to leave it, like, when they did this
They
solicitation?
did that the last time through, the question was posed to everybody.
Yeah, they
So, like,
asked, do you want to keep it or do you want to remove it?
And
Keep it
everybody,
again.
but you didn't have to reapply, you didn't have to put any, you just check the box?
Right.
It wasn't, it was not, there was not the way we did it in 2019, some of them came back to us, if you wanted to move into the 5 years, you had to reapply and compete for funds. Otherwise, it just sat in the post office.
So if it was still a priority, you need budget for the Northwest?
Right, but we don't really know, and this is why we're re-asking folks to, if it's really a priority,
And
wouldn't you want to move some money into the 5-year TIP to actually get it funded? That's what staff is trying to say. If it's just sitting out there, we're carrying it year after year after year, is it really a priority? That's the question.
Probably
And-
not, if you don't every, I
If we
mean,
don't-
this is
if
a
we don't-
2-year cycle, basically.
Right, every 3 years.
And if they let it go, all right, every 3, so.
Now, to the point of, if you don't mind, to Mike's point about having an institutional memory, we feel that a better way to do that is to have the candidates that were funded with all of the information right in the tip. We can create a title to make clear what this backlog is maybe a better term than an illustrative projects, but when these opportunities arise, we would have the evaluation information in the tip document to say the roundabout at intersection X would have been the next one funded if resources were available, resources might be available. That would have been the next one.
And well, if that's the case, if you want to be librarian, if you want to be the archivist, so that this institutional knowledge doesn't die from the local perspective, then have one bite. Let it be allowed to be renewed one cycle, one tip cycle, so that you're looking at maybe a 6-year window, and then automatically fall off if it hasn't been progressed. That's a reasonable.
Can I ask you something? You're talking about prioritizing those ones that were not funded, though. I like listing them all, but I'm not sure. I would put
Well, I
the
don't-
BC
No, I don't think
area.
we prioritize them.
They're
What's your
not,
thought about the BC ratio? for them?
well, I think it's important to include the BC ratio only because it's already been vetted.
But would that change?
But, yeah,
in the
after,
future?
It could, and maybe that's not,
So the relevance might not be as.
that might not be it.
and our candidate selection is not always about the BC ratio.
Right.
So,
And there are other factors. It's not just the BC ratio, but having the BC ratio in there would remind somebody if the project out of 20 was the one that rated the least versus the most, if there's a group of 20. Now, there are always circumstances where maybe that 20th project is the one that gets selected for whatever the reasons are. Opportunity arises, there's a development or public-private partnership, who knows?
There's
But it doesn't have to be that, and that's why we wanted to get your input on where to go, and we can think about it, we can research it some more and come back to you in January with some options for your consideration, so that before we start programming the tip, we're all on the same page with how we're going to use that post column. Ross, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just to understand the tip overall, if you, let's say you put let's call it a mega project, taking out an exit, and you want it on the tip, because you want the design funds for it, because as Chris is saying, you want to be able to show something when another infrastructure bill comes out that you have something there. To get the design on there, you need to have the construction stated. Am I right with that? So is then that really the reason for the post tip, just to be whatever guidelines there are? It's like, yeah, we want to carve out X million dollars for design. Some regulation says you got to show construction. So then we throw construction in post tip. Is that how the other MPOs?
That's what it appears, and we're gonna look into it a little bit more, but that might be one of the reasons why it's being done that way.
I just think that makes sense. It's like a mega project list for the purpose of getting design started. Your project for Boulevard and 787, everybody's got a mega project.
Right. It almost
That seems
lends
like the
itself-
logical way to do it.
It almost lends itself to having the tip be amended, its format itself, to consider projects in excess of X amount of dollars or X amount of time. Not utilizing a post-tip scenario, but actually forecasting the reality of when construction is anticipated.
But design has to be included. That's the
Well,
issue here.
no,
Right?
it would
You
be
can't
all
put
3 phases that would have to be inclusive in the project.
not in post tip. That's the issue,
No,
right?
it would
All
be-
of these don't progress because there's no design now.
Just thinking of projects, like that are big, that are hard. The Congress Street, you got your $6 million from your TNI, that's great. The Albany Skyway, that's great. But to me, those are big projects that need stuff. That's how I would see it, is if I could put in design, and get, even if it's small and it's almost like a planning thing and work, and we could say,
30% or something.
yeah, we could get to some level. I mean, there could be, we're thinking about doing it this way. They could say, hey, you know what? 890 is kind of a mess right there. Maybe we just get rid of it. We'll loop everybody.
I don't know, but you're looking at it from that perspective. And then you come back with, I think about the bridge project that I did, that I even presented at the state conference, right? I went in and I sat at this table and I said, I want to preserve these bridges. And then we looked at it and nobody wanted the bridges. We took the bridges down. We saved $500,000. We took the bridges down and we went a completely different way. And how am I supposed to know that in a flash of a pan when they pass something? And, it might be talking about R, I wasn't here for R, but like, we weren't really ready. We did Van Branken, which was great. We did, but they just said, we need a project. We didn't have a shelf at the time. And we just went out, we did Van Branken over because it was a street, and we did all these ramps and we spent a ton of money on it. And it was like, yeah, but did we really have to do anything? It didn't have complete streets elements. It wasn't thought of, it wasn't planned out, it did it. To have something on the shelf, that I would love to do it like a design and then a post. I don't use the post like this. I've never had, but that's how I would use it in my head, is this and put the design out, and in 10 years, administration's changed, everything changed. I know I have that liability out there of $100,000. That's whatever I pay it. That's how it will be. And I don't know what a PEL is, Bob. What is?
The planning environmental linkage study, and that's basically the study that we have out for 378. Sort of that first high level cut of major environmental considerations to stay away from as you get into planning design. It's sort of the stuff that would still have shelf life going forward, as opposed to having to start not triggering NEPA or the environmental, not the clock ticking underneath.
That's what would make sense for the exit we're talking.
Right.
And is how do you start that process? How do you do it?
I mean, it's similarly the same way. I mean, the Pell study was with, I think, the total is 800,000 or something was put on the tip last time around.
So it
was proposed as a project.
Tip fund, and it comes out of what fund source?
Any of the core funding ones that we have.
That's the project in and of itself. It has an end.
It has an end. That's the project.
And that's
for now.
That's the project, right? That's all we're talking.
You've established a foundation of commencing a project by getting the environmental, getting the archaeological, getting all the elements that aren't going to change into the future. So if you get that done, that's fine in and of itself, but then commencing an actual project on the tip, you got to be ready to go. You can't anticipate funds arriving. I look back at that, and DOT resurrected a project that the city screwed up and completed it in conjunction with that. We had a couple other public utility projects, but we weren't in a position to advance projects that quickly.
We're gonna come back to this in our future.
Even if we
meeting.
had something up there
Move on to the next slide.
that was listed, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be ready to go in that short of time with the requirements for that project to advance.
Last paragraph, Joe.
Sorry, just one question for anyone at the table. Is there any value in having items on the post tip outside of CDTC? I think you kind of touched on that, just to point to it and say that it is something that's beyond the point of the thought. I don't know if anyone's experienced that with funding outside of the CDC or the tip cycle. That's my question.
You mean outside of you?
Just to say, if you outside funding, outside of CDTC or federal funding, if there is a funding opportunity, just to say that this is documented somewhere, and be able to point to it rather than just an old application that I have. Here you go.
I can give an example of that from Clifton Park's standpoint. With the recent infrastructure bill through Congress, we had Congressman Tonko request projects that had a tip number but may be deficient in funding. So our project on the post tip, which we're resubmitting under this tip, was one of the projects that we were able to submit to the congressman's office. It also provided validity to our GEIS study area, that when we had a site plan adjacent to a project, we were able to acquire and get buy-in from a private property owner to annex or convey in donation a part of the land that would be needed for a future roundabout. So it did help advance projects. It did provide an opportunity when the congressman said, projects that had a tip number and it wasn't and funded, just a tip number, were eligible under the infrastructure bill.
I thought it said and funded, currently funded under the tip. No, that was excluded. It could be just because their office, just didn't understand it completely.
I mean, I don't want to digest. Some of that was related to the eligibility component of it. It was sort of, if it already had a tip number, it had been screened as an eligible sort of project around the table versus something that was a brand new idea. And then you got into the subject of eligibility, but that's kind of another topic. But I mean, to John's point, it certainly demonstrates support around the table when it already has a tip number.
Right. So, we'll come back to this topic. We just wanted to have a discussion today. I think we've heard a wide variety of thoughts. And we'll probably be reaching out to you guys. We have some time, and we'll come back to you in January with some options for your consideration. So
Good
thank you.
discussion. Thank you all. Yep. Moving on, next item on our agenda is 5C, the 2019 through 24 tip project selection summary. Jacob Beeman, can you give us the overview?
Yep, so starting last month, we're now including a list of all project selection changes that were made during the last month from now until the last planning committee meeting. And so project selection, again, are small budget changes or schedule changes that we can make without planning committee approval. Sometimes we have many, sometimes we have few. This month, we just have one, which is a kind of Clifton Park project. Moore Road multi-use path right of way was rolled over from last fiscal year to this fiscal year, and that has no impact on overall funding.
Any questions for Jacob on this single project? Report, section move, okay. Next on the agenda, 5D, Delta is the 2023 UpWP planning project solicitation status, and Sandy's going to update us on the solicitation.
Yeah, just a brief update and really a reminder that the UpWP solicitation remains open. The deadline for proposals for local governments and the state and other partners is November 24th. If you have any questions, reach out to us and we'll be happy to talk with you about your ideas.
Thanks, Sandy. Any questions on the solicitations that are out? All documented. Yeah, last page of our. Item 5E Echo is the CDTC project delivery update. Jacob again?
So just a few project updates from our monthly consultant updates. City of Schenectady, Rosa Road, Wendell Avenue, and Knott Street intersection improvements. We saw letting held back in July. Village of Green Island project, Cahosa Avenue, Arch Street to Cahosa City Line, Millenville. Draft design report completed in August. And Village of Scotia project, Washington Avenue, Viking Head connection. Draft design report completed in September. Didn't reach out to my sponsors last month, so this upcoming month, I'm going to be reaching out to 6 sponsors. I will be contacting City of Saratoga Springs, Saratoga County, Village of Green Island, Town of Bethlehem, City of Waterloo, and Town of Guilderland. So again, I'll be sending emails out to all of you, just requesting most recent updates on your TIP projects. Don't have a sponsor presentation today. And just as always, we can find the most recent updated project delivery spreadsheet online with the meeting notes. I don't think we actually printed them out today, so we'll make sure we get those printed out next time for the in-person attendees. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions on project delivery?
Steve, so we have the project that Jacob mentioned. It was let, and they actually started construction last week. And as everybody, I'm sure, is aware, we've done it. The city has 6 active federal aid projects in construction, and 3 of them, maybe 4, involve signals, and almost everything is not available. So there's a lot of lead times. We're putting some curb in place, and we're waiting. Still Sting's a major player in town, but everything from poles to anchor bolts are unavailable. So even doing the groundwork, prep for foundations and arrival of the poles is not possible. Curbing, it's been hard to find. We've actually changed our curbing to get different curbing just so that we can actually get curbing because they stopped cutting it. There have been some COVID outbreaks and some of the labor forces, so that's hurt. But we have projects going, but it's very odd. It is a very odd time to do any kind of construction.
very challenging circumstances with supply chain issues in virtually every aspect of construction, improvements, every aspect right now is seeing some challenges between supply chain and staffing. You know, we're not out of the woods yet, that's pretty clear. Thanks for sharing that. Any other comments on the project deliveries? Next up is the DOT project delivery schedule. Is it Bob or Greg?
No, first of all, I didn't want to interrupt the presentation earlier. I want to say, before anybody gets any ideas of open cutting the interstate, support may have been a little bit strong of a word. It is an option, it's an expensive option, but.
I know there's a tunnel at Stratford. I'm gonna say there's a project in Stratford.
Which is another expensive option, so.
Boring's coming on, right?
And certainly, they are strange times in terms of supplies and delivery and stuff on all of our sites, but we have had some really competitive bids since we met last time, about $25 million worth of bids with 4 projects that were all right around or below the engineer's estimate. The I-90 over Erie Boulevard, Broadway was, we've got that project awarded. The Sitterly Road over the Northway, the bridge replacement, the emergency bridge replacement again. The estimate was right around the low bid. The 144 over Hannah Creek. And we mentioned the Carmen Road, the roundabouts at Lydius and the Ferry entrance were also that. So it's been a productive month. That's all I have for today.
Any questions for Bob on the bidding overview? Greg, anything to add? Okay.
No, nothing to add from my point. So thank you.
We're envious. We're admiring your pool in the background there. Very good. Any questions? Okay.
Living room.
No, there you go. The CDTC planning activities, Sandy?
Yeah, the chart highlighting the status of our linkage program planning work, our technical assistance planning program, and our what I'll call our regional CDTC planning initiatives. As you can see, we have a lot going on here. We're actually down a total of 3 staff people right now. So that's part of why we're having to close ranks a little bit on taking on additional work right now, knowing that the tip update is coming. With Glenn's retirement, there'll be a lot of changes with the CIP. Jacob Beeman is going to be our new TIP program manager. So if you have questions about TIP amendments or anything related to the TIP, please reach out to Jacob. But just in terms of how we do things, how we communicate information to you folks, all of that is going to change. When we build this new TIP, it's not going to look like the TIP that you've seen for the last 30 years. So it'll be a refresh. I think it'll be a better TIP. That's part of why we're having these conversations about how we've done things in the past and what needs to stay, what needs to evolve, what needs to be adjusted. So expect more of that as we move forward. But we have a lot going on here. So check the chart. I won't go through it all because there's too much. But we'll be in touch with many of you in the coming weeks.
Any questions for Sandy on CDTC planning?
Sandy, are you down because of COVID or because of, I don't even know about one.
So I've never replaced myself. So that's one. Glenn's retirement and Jordan Solano-Reed took position in New York City at New York City DOT. So we are hiring right now. Actually, we just received about 20 to 25 resumes. We're going to start interviews this month. I'm hoping to get 2 in the next couple of months, maybe 3, if there's some good candidates. But I expect to staff up in the next. I know hiring has been challenging out there, listening to others.
All 3 positions?
Well, we'll fill 2 for sure. I think this fall, winter, and then the 3rd we may just see how things play out.
So 2. Hold on.
Yep.
Thanks for the update. Any other questions? Status of regional and local planning is next up. 6 agencies listed. First is the Regional Planning Commission with Mark.
Thank you, Steve. US Census full results are still delayed to sometime in 2022, 2 years after the census. So we'll be reporting back once they release the full data set. CDRPC was awarded a Climate Smart Communities Outreach Grant from the DEC last month. That's going to fund our work to do outreach to help municipalities access a variety of funding programs and walk through a variety of steps to attain the status of a climate smart community. There's also a transportation component of that grant program. We're partnered with CDTC, in which we're going to engage in some outreach and coordination and public input related to climate change in the transportation sector, primarily focused on areas that are not covered by NPOs, because NPOs already kind of know what they want to do in that space. We recently partnered with CEG to do a supply chain study for offshore wind. Steve was talking about the supply chain, trying to maximize, and onshore, a lot of the upstream supply chain that's needed to operationalize a significant offshore wind industry at the Port of Albany. We also partnered with CEG on a grant to the Build Back Better Regional Challenge that contemplates about $75 to $100 million of projects locally, also focused on the offshore wind / clean energy sectors. We will be awarded about $140,000 to work on broadband in the region, primarily focused on Rensselaer, Saratoga, and Schenectady counties through the Northern Border Regional Commission. And we'll also be pulling together a workshop with the state's new vendor that's been tasked with identifying a much more finely tuned inventory of broadband access statewide. So we're going to be hosting a webinar hopefully within the next month or so with that vendor to connect people, and particularly municipalities who have been thinking about doing some work related to broadband with what they're doing, with the kind of data they will generate, and how they can sort of tailor their plans to anticipate the data that's going to be developed through that project. So that's the update there.
Any questions for Mark on regional planning initiatives? Thanks for the census update. I mean, I was in the news this morning on redistricting, a lot of things statewide, driven by the census. For the first time, the 3 cities may no longer be in one congressional district. This morning's news. Any insights on that? Do you work with the state commission?
Happily, I am not involved in redistricting.
The state independent commission is overseeing that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a very political process. We just hope they draw the districts fairly and equitably based on the populations within those areas. But you know, the good news about the cities is that the population has grown for the second consecutive decennial census. So it's not a blip. It's now a trend, which is a good thing.
Mark, do you provide them with information though, non-political, that you provide this?
There's a whole
whole
apparatus out there that has dices and slices the redistricting data.
No, not redistricting. I'm just saying in general, when they do like elections and things like that, and they go to demographics of areas, do you get involved with that? Or are you the one who are
There are
supplying them with
political
demographic
consultants that make a very fine living providing that kind of data.
There's an industry. Very good. Thank
I mean,
you.
we provide it, but you know, certainly not tailored to those kind of specifics.
All right, very good. Anything else? Second is the CTA, Ross Farrell.
The couple things. One, Washington Western BRT Purple Line construction continues. The biggest being piece that you can see is if you're driving down I-90 near Everett Road, you'll see the expansion of our Albany garage, which is going to house the new Purple Line buses. We've also began construction of the busway at the University at Albany. Obviously, there's going to be only a limited amount of work that's going to happen this year because the cold weather's coming. Most of that's going to happen next year. Same issue, supply chain issue. So we used to say, you know, fall, late 2022, early 2023. Now we're definitely going to say the middle of 2023 just because of getting materials in to keep it going. You may have heard in the news that Montgomery County voted to become part of the CDTA service area. That does not mean that we're immediately going to start service there though, because county voting to become part of CDTA. Part of that is the mortgage reporting tax. That only comes up with a very, very small amount of funding for operations. So really have to work with the state, the federal partners, in figuring out how we're going to fund that service. But technically, CDTA can start serving into Montgomery County, which is good for the capital region because whatever routes that we have in Montgomery County will definitely go into Schenectady County, and maybe even express routes that go into downtown Albany. And ridership, I think Melissa at the last meeting touched on this. Ridership, due to our new contracts with schools and our partnership with OGS to provide state workers with free public transit, has got ridership at least back up to around 85–90%, what it used to be, which is doing very well when you compare us to our peers
Thanks, Russ. Any questions?
Seeing those shuttles around, is it just my observation of them, or is it, the smaller, I forget the term you guys use for
the flex?
Flex.
Flex
Yeah.
buses.
Is that been amped up or something? For
Sorry.
some reason I'm seeing that.
No, sorry, that's another one. So we expanded our flex service to now it currently operates, or did operate, just in the suburban area of Colony and Guilderland. We've now expanded it into Saratoga County, where it's going to operate in Mechanicville into exit 9. Not in Schenectady.
No, I was just seeing it.
Out
I traveled to
Guilderland.
Guilderland. I hadn't noticed it before. I knew you had implemented the program. I was wondering if it got ramped up or if there's some, because now I'm seeing them and I wasn't before. So
It's
anecdotal.
No, it's a good point. It's gone from, in the peak, we used to have 2 buses, now there's 3, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're probably seeing more buses because there's 50% more buses. It's a good service in the sense for suburban areas where fixed route doesn't, asking somebody, hey, just walk that quarter mile to the bus stop is easy to do in the city. In a suburban area where it may not have the infrastructure, it doesn't work as well. So that's why we're using it, and we're really still, the tough part about the flex and microtransit is, and even with the Blue Line BRT, is we rolled them out in the middle of a pandemic. So it's hard to really look at how successful they are in comparison to the rest of the system. But yeah, no, they are expanding. It's a good tool for us in lower density areas.
Almost to 2019 levels, do you think now on overall bus ridership, just overall trend?
85–90%. And again, that's just, all I've got is one solid month showing that. So until we want to see that there's something that's a trend before we say, all right, we're back to the normal numbers.
Anyone else? Next up is DOT.
And to your point, VMT is up and accidents are up, crashes are up. It's
Distracted driving is up.
yeah, we all forgot how to drive apparently. And, it's certainly an area of concern, both regionally, statewide, federally, the accident rate, the crash rates. A couple things that I thought were interesting. I've had several conversations with municipalities the last couple of weeks related to bike lanes, probably around the CDTC solicitation, but I wanted to bring up, if within the scope of a preservation project, and they do a lot of annual paving type work, and generally our thought is to go down to the 11-foot lanes and maximize the shoulder width for the accommodation of cyclists. If there is 5 foot available there and there's interest, then the amenities of striping it as such as a bike lane, signing and things like that with 5 foot. If we cannot get 5 foot because holes are there or there are other sort of issues, you'd still have the enhanced shoulder, but at least for now, we're still reluctant to label that as a bike lane there, even though the enhancement is there. So I'm trying to, be consistent in those answers for lots of reasons in these simplified projects and the design reports we do for them. It is limited in scope in what we can do in these preservation pavement projects, but we are trying to make that accommodation if if there's not the 5 foot available or there are other circumstance, whether that's sort of where you need to go up beyond preservation project, either through the municipality or another solicitation, but we're trying to be consistent with that as we make the rounds with the preservation program. In terms of the bridge in Culver, New York, we're anticipating announcements at any time. I said the in-house staff stuff has been done and it's been submitted to the folks upstairs, to the commissioner's office. So, you know, whatever the timing, we should see those announcements sooner than later. But the part that I think it's interesting, I mean, this covers the 8 counties, not the 4 that represent DOT Region 1. But we had 24 bridge applications for about $59 million against a total pot of $90 million for upstate. And when I compare that with the TAP CMAT, which are still with the reviewers, we had 27 applications seeking just over $50 million for statewide availability of $110 million. So we've proportionally, the government has always done very well in those programs, but obviously all programs are severely overprescribed. And it sort of all comes back to our discussion about things that don't make the cut on the tip and sort of not losing them and the amount of backlog that exists for infrastructure needs. So
you're keeping your own wish list.
those aren't our projects. Those are you know, locally derived projects. We've got another list in the drawer. I don't, it was mentioned as well. DOT is also aggressively hiring right now. Lorenzo needs help in a lot of ways. Those two easy. So, as well in our office, as well as other, we are looking for at the PE level position. There is no promotional list right now. It's basically an open competitive, and the starting rate at $82,000. And cases can be made for folks with more experience to go higher than that. So if folks are interested, as opposed to the operation side, the ability to find mechanics or CDL drivers, we're at least marketplace competitive in terms of salary on the engineering side, but we're having a very hard time. They were sure at least 50 drivers short going into this winter, and there's already talk of lake effect, you know, this week in some of the higher elevations. So we're not sure what we're going to get into. We're also hiring at the junior engineer level position, the graduate position. I think that starts at about 57 right now to work up. So if there are candidates out there, we're hiring as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions? Last chance on
We're gonna
DOT.
be putting in the city, because we made a Bridge New York and a TAP CMAC application, but we don't hear, we're gonna put both into the tip, and then if anything, we'll have to remove them. The only frustrating part of it, it's just more work, you know, less staff with repetitive work to do that. So I know it's not on you, we're gonna have to do it.
I mean, we convey that. I know, I talked with Diane Keneally at the local bridge conference, and resoundingly, that's a very common comment that she gets.
I think a lot of people around the table here are doing the same thing. You're sitting there saying, oh, because of the timing.
Yeah, it would be great if, I mean, I'm not saying it would be great if I could just hand you those applications, because they're done, they're sitting, they're PDFs on my computer, you know. And so I got to put it all into the other formats. There's going to be the 2 ones.
You told me how much you love landscaping.
Love grant. Every time you want to do something on it, and it's last minute, it just shuts down and the system crashes. It's great.
It tends to, whatever the due date is, it tends to crash on that day. Everybody's putting it in at the same time.
Capacity.
Firewalls, you can have the fastest computers going, but then the IT security walls can, you know, just choke it right down real quick.
I'm hoping Dropform does not do that to you folks. Let me know if there's any issues on that front.
Anything last, all right?
Before we leave that topic, in terms of what you just described, the bicycling component of the preservation project, could we maybe update the beyond preservation sort of summary that we have on our website regarding the tip update. Because it sounds like that's important parameters for sponsors to understand what might be viewed as a preservation versus beyond. So we can talk about that offline.
Sure. Hey, Sandy, you mentioned jot form. I just want to say, I've not experienced any of that, but printing out something, there is overlap of the format.
Oh, is there? Okay. All right. That's good to know. We'll look at that. Thank you.
Discussion, okay, Rolling Stone from Thruway Authority, I don't believe. Airport authorities next, I can report on that. We're at 82% of passenger levels from 2019. So we're still missing 18% being the business traveler, and international travel is still way off. Some hope on the horizon and very slow incremental progress noted for passenger movements. They're still demanded. These are watched daily, weekly, monthly. We have excellent data. I'll share it with the regional data dashboard. See if you get it. Cargo is still very strong at 12%. Scheduled cargo on FedEx, UPS. On the capital side, we're doing a lot of pavement. Finishing up mile and a half of taxiway right now. We have right constructions, wrapping that up for the season. We'll be designing and bidding in a few months the crosswind runway. And we're in for design on terminal expansion to allow for social distancing at the queuing area before security. We've got improved concessions and queuing there. Right now, can be a long line going back into the garage. But that's my quick recap on airport operations. So we're almost back to full 2019, but this is just shy of the 18%. Any questions? Happy to answer. And Sandy's going to report for the Port Authority.
Attorney Vassal offers his apologies for not being able to make it, but he provided me this update to share with you. Maritime results, ships and barges are up 20% at the port. Tonnage is up 31%. Offshore wind, the project site in Bethlehem, the 83 acres, will be cleared the first quarter of 2021, with construction anticipated to begin the second quarter, with completion in, I think you meant to say 2022, by the way. Completion anticipated for completion in the fourth quarter of 2023. More interestingly, related to Mark's point about the supply chain, these are his words. You have probably heard and seen in various venues that the supply chain is in disarray. This is impacting many areas, including the upcoming holiday season. Albany does not have a container service as it is a break bulk and heavy lift project cargo port. There are 79 container ships sitting outside the Port of LA, Long Beach right now, waiting to be discharged and moved. Approximately 30 container ships are sitting outside the Port of Savannah in Georgia, waiting to be discharged. So in brief, the factors that are contributing to that situation: the ocean terminals have no space for any additional containers. There's a driver shortage, as T folks mentioned. Chassis, the unit that the container is mounted on, are actually in short supply. Warehouse capacity is at its peak in port areas, and this situation is also the same over in Europe. So it's a mess, frankly, everywhere.
Inclusive of that, there's a shortage now of containers.
There's a shortage of containers. There's a typhoon that created problems in China, so now there's 70 ships sitting outside the ports in China waiting to pick up goods. So you have that side of the equation. There's a problem in Vietnam with COVID restrictions. It's going to just the supply chain. The message here is it's trickle down and expect some disarray for some time to come.
The dominoes are going to stay stranded.
Yeah.
Flying to Albany, right, Steve?
Right. That's the news on the port and shipping side.
We've got over 50% cargo with FedEx and UPS capacity available. Those planes are flying half empty. We got to figure a way to get the intermodal solution.
Drones over the ocean, no?
I heard one analysis, people are ordering a lot more IKEA furniture, electronics, everything else. We're buying more. There's demand is increased. It is helping drive all this as well.
A lot of challenges.
Yeah, so everyone staying home from work than redoing, to build their workplace at the home place. That was part of that. Interesting discussions, were very challenging times, transportation is key. Any closing remarks? Our next meetings coming up are on November 9th, Bike and Ped, November 17th, Grade Advisory, November 24th, is the UPWP Planning Project Solicitation Deadline, it says. December 2nd is our next meeting here with our policy board. December 3rd is the tip solicitation deadline for new projects. So we watch those all closely. Motion to adjourn, and thank you for your time and
Thanks everyone for your patience with our technology today.
talent treasure. Thank you.